He's playing mono white aggro, so this will be kind of fun.
Revelations broke me. That's why I'm not a blue mage anymore. I don't play blue anymore. It's because of Revelations.
It's about time you came around to your mid-range roots.
Dude, I don't know why I mean, when I was a kid, we used to show up and play Orcish Librarian and Goblin Digging Team and the likes, and we were happy to bring the beats that we were able to bring.
Growing up in Ohio, that's the monsters of the mid-range right there. We love some mid-range decks over there, Ohio.
Oh yeah, Ohio was ahead of the curve on the playing mid-range, kind of medium creatures.
Yeah, maybe even when mid-range wasn't good. Well, we still did it. Yeah. We still did it. But I'm glad to see you jump over here. I guess your mid-range deck was very powerful.
I don't remember ever playing anything besides mid-range.
Really?
Yeah,
the cruel ultimatum phase?
I don't even. What's
a
cruel ultimatum?
Did that not happen?
Cruel ultimatum sounds like a cool creature, but I'm mostly interested in little white creatures. And once Lifebane Zombie rotates out, be excited for bigger creatures.
Your good friend Fleecebane line, we can't forget about that.
Yeah, that guy does not mess around.
You guys did a lot of work together. Looks like Walden's going to be taking a mulligan here. Lossett waiting patiently with his 7 cards in hand.
That's what I love about Fleecebane Lion. Somehow, everybody loses their mind over Watchwolf, and then they reprint Watchwolf with the most unbelievable extra ability, and everybody's like, hey, that card's not very good.
It's just a 3/3. Who cares? Walden with a Boros late to get things started here. We'll see if Lossett knows what he's up against right away. It is, again, mono white aggro. No splashes here, just plain. Sometimes we see versions with red for Boros Charm, black for Zethrid Necromancer, but again, no splashes for Walden. Lossett going to play another copy of Temple of Deceit. Going to leave the top card on top before kicking it back over to Walden, who will take a draw, and we'll see what he wants to deploy now after attacking here for 1 with the Elite.
Super excited to see what these white aggro decks look like once they have access to Spirit Bonds.
That card looks real good.
That card looks real good. You're talking about, I mean, if black got Bitter Blossom, this one is, the Sweet Blossom. This one is like...
Well, it's about time.
Yeah?
It's about time. Yeah, Could we have had that when Kithkin was around? Would that have been in
too good? Kithkin are back?
Yeah, I guess in theory
none of the good ones.
Yeah, but they are back.
They are back.
Lossett gonna play a Hallowed Fountain untap, pass the turn back, and representing a Dissolve, potentially an Azorius Charm here.
Actually, the greatest of all the Kithkin is still legal though.
Who's that?
Mutavault.
For now.
Oh,
we're gonna lose them. Hey, I love Mutavault. That's no burn, man. I love Mutavault. Mutavault may be too good to have around again for another year, though.
Definitely.
That card
Mutavault was too good to have around for the past year.
Yeah. That card's real good.
Mutavault is not a realistic Magic card.
Walden going to play a Plains here, so land number 3. Going to fire up a Mutavault and attack here for a bunch and turn on Battalion. So looks to be an attack for 3, 6, 7, 8 damage headed Lossett's way. We'll see if he can do anything to break this up. You see the Azorius Charm at the ready.
Yeah, I like Azorius Charm here, even if you walk face first into Brave the Elements. You got to do something. You can't just hang out. That Brave's going to be there.
Looks like the Battalion triggers are going to be announced here really quickly. Lossett's going to see how much damage he would potentially be taking. Again, an attack here for 8, so he would go down to 9 if he took all of this, but I don't imagine he'll have interest in doing that. And now we're seeing if Battalion is optional, when you do announce the trigger and all of that stuff, so there's been some rules changes with those cards. Now Joe looks like he is going to go reaching here for Azorius Charm. Again, it's going to be one of those white creatures or a Mutavault. It's going to be the Daring Skyjet that's going to go on top. So no Brave the Elements there from Walden.
Yeah, I mean, if you feared the Brave the Elements, you could always target the Mutavault, but I kind of like just being greedy here.
We'll see if Walden wants to deploy another threat. Does have a Judge's Familiar in hand at the ready.
The only problem is that it kind of telegraphs that you don't have Supreme Verdict. But he does not get punished, as Donald has nothing to follow up with.
Joe going to play a Temple of Silence here. Take a look at the top card. That one's going to go to the bottom really quick. It does have a Detention Sphere as well as a Dissolve, so see if Joe wants to play either one of these spells here. Can, of course, represent Dissolve or cast the Detention Sphere. Gonna leave Dissolve up, knows his opponent is drawing a copy of a copy of Daring Skycheck.
Yeah, I got a feeling we're gonna be seeing even more splashing of black or red in these white decks. We've seen it a fair bit with the things like the Zethrid Necromancer that you mentioned, or Boros Charm when they go red. But I think that the printing of Caves of Koilos and Battlefield Forge, when you stack those on, with Sacred Foundry and Godless Shrine and Mana Confluence if you want it, the Temples if you want them, the mana is going to be so good for White Splash Black and White Splash Red that it's going to be hard to get away from, even if you have just the lightest splash,
Dissolve going to take care of Daring Skyjack here. That's actually kind of interesting too, because only the enemy, what looks to be, only the enemy cycles get their lands. So we don't get to see Adakar Waste or Underground River or stuff like that. So you mentioned that some of those enemy decks, maybe even Black Green Devotion, getting access to Llanowar Waste now as well. Their mana's already pretty good, but maybe they cut those Golgari Guild Gates for some number of wastes.
Yeah. I think it's going to be most impactful for the very aggressive decks with 1-drops. The prospect of being able to consistently curve out 1, 2, 3. Like just thinking about a fast Naya deck, how many different, their mana is basically all untapped if they want, and then they can just play all the biggest bodies.
You see the set play adjacent ticking on up. Walden's going to play up Plains. That's his 5th land. 2 of those lands are Mutavaults, however, which is pretty important. Can turn on the battalion there of Boros Elite if he would like to. It's not going to be the most impressive attack, but it's better than nothing, and that's what's going to happen right now. So an attack here for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Minus each of the Jace triggers will be for 4, and we'll see exactly where we're going. If it'll be towards the Planeswalker or towards Lossett. And it looks like it may be towards the Planeswalker. Now here's a copy of a Johnny's Presence, so Jace is going to bite the dust. And those Mutavaults are proving to be pretty problematic here for Lossett.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Mutavault's always very effective against these control decks, but part of the problem is that Lossett just is too far behind in tempo. He's got to get something going. This is what happens when you don't have any 2-mana removal spells, and Lossett's playing the much more controlling, anti-control, anti-black version. He's even got some anti-red cards in the sideboard, but he is not equipped at all for white. And historically, Esper has, blue-white decks have been quite good against, or at least Esper has been good against white aggro, but this blue-white deck is so far away from the old blue-white decks, it actually matches up quite poorly.
Lossett just does deploy another copy of Jace Architect of Thought. The elevator goes up to 5.
What he really needs is to get Elspeth on the table, but missing his land drop has been extremely costly.
Walden going to tap some mana on the main phase here, 3 of it to be exact. Now, he's going to play a copy of Frontline Medic. Haven't seen that one for a while.
Yeah, everything that was old is new again.
That one was out there to kind of host Sphinx's Revelation a little bit from white decks. Now Walden's going to play a Soldier and a Judge.
Shoves all in.
Yep. The next turn could be really, really good one here. Lossett going to take a draw. It's a Plains. But as you mentioned, I don't think he has a Supreme Verdict right now. Maybe he has to take Chase down to try to find it.
It's definitely very appealing. He's got a couple gold cards, but I think it might be an Azorius Charm and a Sphinx's Rev, or a Detention Sphere and a Sphinx's Rev.
Joe's going to start by playing a Plains. So he wants to manage the Jace this turn.
I do think white-bordered Plains is perhaps the least offensive of all of the white-bordered revised land. At least the white-bordered look, it matches the general landscape and the text box.
I think they're all equally offensive.
The maximum?
They are disgusting.
Now, hold on. Michael Jacob, for instance, he has often played white-bordered basic land, and I think it's actually totally defensible. He's very colorblind, and when he plays with fetch lands, having white-bordered basic land makes it much easier to find his basic lands, because normally it's a little confusing telling the difference between, being able to find them at all. And I still think that it's not particularly excusable. However, it's certainly not, for instance, as bad as somebody who puts their lands in front of their spells.
There you go.
Their lands in front of their creatures. My understanding is that that's going to be a bannable offense soon. But fortunately, there are enough people who care about the integrity of the game and care about the culture, that it means something to, that we don't have too much of that going on anymore.
And that's what's really important. As we see an attack here from Walden, 2 Mutavaults, a Battalion Boros Elite, and a Soldier of the Pantheon. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 minus 4 is going to make an attack here for 5, thanks to Jace. It looks like, from what I've heard, the new Magic Online client as well, you cannot put lands in front of spells. Your land's in the back and spells up front.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it says in the rule book.
Yeah, it's almost like the game was meant to be played that way.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, I completely understand. There's some people who come from a background of other card games that went that way, and there's some people who learned how to play in communities in countries that are, that kind of had a different kind of approach. And there's some people who are Adrian Sullivan and just completely deranged.
Just do whatever you want.
Yeah, just no regard whatsoever for the consequences or, anybody else. But no, Adrian Sullivan, one of the pioneers of Magic, notorious for playing with his cards upside down in addition to, but...
his graveyard pretty much wherever he'd like for it to be.
Yeah. I don't super tolerate that in some tournaments, but whatever floats your boat. As long as it's not lands in front of spells.
A D-Sphere is going to take care of this Boros lead. Jason's going to take up yet again. Lossett is barely hanging on right now. He's not facing lethal next turn due to Jace, but it sure is close.
Now, the thing he has going for him is that next turn he could potentially play Elspeth.
Yes.
And Jace is getting up big enough that his ultimate is becoming a thing soon.
This is true.
So,
Here come Mutavaults. That, not Aetherling. There's a Flare. So Joe casting that Flare will take care of one of those attackers.
Donald had the Ajani's, the
presence.
The Ajani's presence to try to go for the win, but didn't even get a chance to do it yet because Joe just snaps off the Celestial Flare.
So it looks like Joe is going to go down to 2. Walden with a land and Ajani's presence in his hand. Just going to pass the turn back. Lossett needs something good from this Jace. His taking it up is no longer going to work.
Yeah, he did not have an untapped land for his Aetherling. Those 2 Mutavaults are threatening lethal, so assuming that he has Aetherling as his other card, then he's going to end up having to dig. Just no two ways about it. The problem, of course, being that once he digs, both Mutavaults are lethal.
Yep.
So this is a tough spot.
I don't know. I mean, I guess the question is, what can Joe find in the situation? If he digs, it's like he maybe finds like an untapped land or Revelation in X. I don't know if there's a great
Well, the
thing to
problem
find.
is that no matter what the 3 are, he can get a pile of 1.
Yeah.
So he can't actually rely on anything that costs more.
Well, he's going to turn over 3 cards, so we're going to find out either way here. There's a Temple of Enlightenment. That's another temple, and that's Temple of Silence. And Joe says, don't even bother splitting those because I am dead. And I think, yeah, he's going to pick him up. So Donald Walden's going to win in game number 1 here for Joe Lossett. Mono White aggro, taking down Blue White Control in game 1.
Craig Wesco would be proud.
You better believe it. Those white creature beatdowns up a game. Did not expect that, especially after the mulligan, but that actually demonstrates the power of, more than anything else, of Mutavault.
Yeah, I mean, that game was definitely on the back of Mutavault.
Just being able to consistently give Walden an attacker, being able to consistently trigger Battalion for Boros Lead and friends. Mutavault has looked impressive for a long time now, and that's just another example, another check mark in its book.
Well, that's one of the tough things about playing the blue-white deck instead of Esper, is that once you don't have access to things like Doomblade or Devour Flesh or Far Away, it can become very difficult to actually answer a Mutavault. Main deck, Joe Lossett has just 2 Celestial Flares regarding actual removal. His primary plan is to block with one of his Mutavaults or to use an Elspeth to produce enough blockers. That is very, very little defense. Now, the good news for Joe is that, of course, he has access to 2 Pithing Needles in his sideboard, which will definitely be coming in here to be able to name Mutavault. With potentially also, depending on how the game goes, he might end up naming Johnny, Caller of the Pride, or Gideon. He doesn't know that Donald actually has access to a couple of Planeswalkers of his own.
We're taking a look here at the sideboard for Walden. He's got a Godsend, 2 copies of Burmez, 3 Keening Apparition, a Fiendslayer Paladin, 2 Glare of Heresy, a Banisher Priest, 2 Celestial Flare of his own, 2 copies of Deicide, and then a Spear of Heliod. So the sideboard's a little all over the place here, but the cards that are actually important, got like Keening Apparition against what you presume is the Detention Sphere version of this deck. You also got to like Glare of Heresy for the exact same reasons, also taking care of Elspeth. Maybe you want Deicide, maybe you don't. I mean, how many of those effects do you want? Keening Apparition does get to attack while waiting to take care of a Sphere of a Banishing Light. And then, of course, Spear of Heliod can pump up those creatures to make the game go by a little bit quicker if he wants access to that.
Yeah, I think he's got to be real careful bringing in stuff like Glare of Heresy, purely reactive cards. Because, like, for instance, Joe, the only other thing Joe gets out of his sideboard are these Night Veil Specters. And the last thing that Donald wants to end up doing is facing something like a Night Veil Specter, having a reactive card, and not even having it match up right. What he really wants is something like Spear of Heliod, which can be proactive, but at the same time also be reactive in a way. I think once he gets to the spot of having to Glare of Heresy and Elspeth, times are already pretty tough. But that said, being able to Glare of Heresy Detention Sphere might be enough to make it worth it. I think the main thing he wants to do is keep the aggression up, focus on the Bramazes and the Keening Apparitions, and just stay real aggressive. Take advantage of the fact that Lossett is playing a real slow deck, a lot of tap lands, not a lot of spot removal, and he doesn't know that Lossett doesn't have access to Doomblade, but even if Lossett has Doomblade, you want to be consistent. You don't want to get stuck drawing too many non-threats.
If you are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Patrick Chapin, StarCityGames.com Open Series, has made its way to Portland, Oregon. At SCG Live, hashtag SCGPORT for your tweets all weekend long. Round 3 of 10 is where we're at. A lot of people asking about M15 cards and our thoughts, and trust me, we will get to Hushwing Gryff and its playability in Modern and many other things over the course of this weekend. We've talked about the Planeswalkers some. We'll talk about the Soul series as well. M15 shaping up to be maybe the best core set ever.
Well, it's real tough because Alpha is a core set.
If you want to get technical.
And it's not just that Alpha is the most powerful, because it's not. Beta's more powerful. It has both
Sure.
Volcanic Island and Circle of Protection Black. Oof. But Alpha is a true masterpiece. I don't think there's ever been a set as well designed as Alpha, and obviously there are sets that are better designed now from the built on what we know. But at the time, it really helped that Alpha had a few years of development and three different independent elements of genius at the same time. But even if we set aside the original set as a core set, I think that M10 is quite possibly the second most important set in the history of Magic. It was the true turning point that turned, that brought Magic back to life to full strength and has caused it to go on to grow to be bigger than anybody ever could have imagined, and to have every indication of being able to outlive us all. And I think that the real question is if M15 can compete with M11, because I think M11 was also a very, very good, it was a very strong and well-designed set, and it's tough. I give the edge to M11, but I think that M15 is certainly the core set that I'm the most excited for in the last many years, Like, it's got so many fun cards, so many things I want to work with, so much stuff that looks like it's going to shake up the format, and it just looks sweet.
There's real buzz about it.
Yeah.
There really is. Like, unlike something we've seen for a while, and you can really feel that with this particular core set that the landscape is going to change in Standard. That's the big one, I think. Because, core sets have their effects. Most of the time they feel like as though they're relatively minor, but this one feels like, wow, okay. There's definitely some things changing within the next month or two.
Yeah, in the words of the poet laureate Beck, things are going to change. I can feel it.
An attack for 2 here for the Soldier of the Pantheon. Lossett's going to go down to 18. Walden with a second land into, a couple copies of Boros Lead, so a very aggressive start.
No Detention Sphere, no Detention Sphere. This is not good.
I'm afraid I've got some bad news. There's a Detention Sphere. Donald could gain a life, however.
Yeah.
Opting against that as well.
Yeah, I think he wants to just show no fear whatsoever. And quite frankly, it's not clear that's the wrong play.
Attack here for 2. Lossett's going to go down to 16. Walden with a couple of lands. Really needed those Boros Leads to get the job done, but those are gone for right now. Don't forget, however, Walden has many ways to get those back. 3 copies of Keening Apparition, 2 Deicide, 2 copies of Glare of Heresy. So Detention Sphere and Banishing Light, those are not safe cards in this matchup.
No, but you know what? Joe Lossett is well known for being a man who doesn't keep the safety on,
Walden going to figure out what to play on this particular turn. Looks like he does have a Cavalry Pegasus to deploy. That, of course, gives humans flying, and now there's another flyer and Judge's Familiar. So the set will untap those 3 lands.
Very different side of Donald Walden's.
This is the slower approach. This is the slower.
See, I would have thought that if you were looking for a creature to board out, that Cavalry Pegasus might have been the first one to consider, just because the primary thing you're paying for is the ability to make your guys unblockable. And it's not of super value, but maybe it's just too important against Elspeth.
Yep.
You know, that's the spot where it really matters.
Jake's going to tick on up to 5. We saw how powerful this could be last game, but it wasn't enough to get the job done. I think the really scary card is the other card in Joe's hand, which is a copy of Archangel of Thune. Spirit of Heliod's going to be deployed here by Walden. It'll buff his team a little bit to ignore that Jace trigger. So we could see actually Jace just bite the dust here. Actually go down to 1, excuse me. And that's what will happen. So Lossett will untap and take a draw. Draws another copy of Archangel of Thune. We have seen players actually use kind of this transform sideboard over Magic's history, and Lossett is employing that right now with Archangel.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, perhaps this is the real argument of why you need Glare of Heresy. Archangel of Thune is super effective, but Donald has Banishing Priest.
Wow, all right.
Well, they were in his main deck anyway, and perhaps he was thinking whether it's Archangel or Night Veil. I mean, Joe Lossett's list is very well known.
Yeah, and you beat me to it. If you follow the Open Series and you know Joe, he top 8'd last weekend.
Yep.
But one of the big things is that he's been employing Archangel and Night Veil Spectre together in blue-white control for some time now. So you have to imagine that, all right, Archangels are coming in some number. This weekend he has 4, where most weekends he has 3. So leaving Banisher Priest in against a blue-white deck may seem a little strange, but it actually makes sense when you think about it.
It's also a nice little hedge where you don't get stuck drawing a too reactive of a card if your gamble, you know, if you were wrong, so to speak. The tough thing, though, of course, is that it leaves you very, very vulnerable to Supreme Verdict.
Jace bites the dust. The other attackers did come through in the air. Losette's down to 14. He does play a land for the turn, reorganizing some mana here. I imagine we'll see maybe another copy of Archangel come down to block the road. And there is another one. So we'll see if Walden has a second answer now. Because it'll be pretty important for him too, or he won't even be able to attack. And it looks like he's slowed down just a little bit. So I feel like the answer here is probably no. Now, Spirit of Heliod does a really nice job of stopping the Archangel from attacking. That's really all that it does right now. Here's another soldier.
The tough thing, though, of course, is that mono white Weenie doesn't super want to play no attacks, no blocks against blue-white control. The potential for an Elspeth or a Jace or a Sphinx's Revelation or an Aetherling to completely take over is, you know, it's a very real threat. And mono white is getting stone cold nothing out of the deal, out of waiting. So this is a real tough spot to be in for the white aggro deck.
Lossett does have an Elspeth in his hand. We'll see if he does want to deploy. You see him rearranging mana here. And Joe may have some interest in deploying the Sun's Champion. Looks like he's going to start just by tapping some mana, however. This might be an Attention Sphere. Looks like it will be. So.
Perhaps hitting the spear. Yeah, he wants to make some forward progress.
It's an aggressive approach, but in he comes.
Yeah, I mean, now the question is, will he activate Mutavault to get a counter on there? And it looks like he opts against it.
Yeah, leaving a Azorius Charm at the ready, passing the turn back. Wants to make sure, I think, that he can play Azorius Charm through Judge's Familiar as well. But this is basically saying, I believe that my Archangel can beat the team that you have in play right now. And, I mean, you got the damage out there. There's 2, 4, 6, there's 8 points of damage. And there's a Skyjack, so you can make it 11 now.
Daring.
Is it ever? Yeah, everybody's going to come in.
Well, the Priest is kind of a bold move, right?
Oh, no. Yeah, this might get bad. Azorius Charm targeting the Priest to get the Archangel back. Now, if there's a Brave the Elements here, everything's okay. But this could have gotten very ugly, and there is.
Well, he wouldn't have attacked with the Banishing Priest if he didn't have anything, because the Mutavault could just eat the Banishing Priest. But I guess the Brave the Elements wasn't going to save the Banishing Priest from the Mutavault.
Yeah.
That's, I like it. That daring is a good way to put it.
Either way, it does end up working out for Walden. 6 points of damage are going to come through. Yeah. However, he's still got to contend with that Archangel that's on the table for Lossett. It's a 4-5 right now. It looks like it has some interest in becoming a 5-6, gaining Lossett some more life over the course of this game. Again, Lossett with a Dissolve in hand, along with the Elspeth. Elspeth, not the end boss that it normally would be, simply because of that Cavalry Pegasus out there. Something I did not expect to say this weekend. Talking about the power of Cavalry Pegasus.
No, I mean, the Cavalry Pegasus is it's a totally respectable late pick for your draft deck. No, I like a Cavalry Pegasus. It's also nice that he's actually taking advantage of the number of humans he has, you know? And it helps give him a way to break through. Brave the Elements, one of the strongest elements of it, the fact that it gives White a way to actually break through. The Cavalry Pegasus, particularly good against things like monsters or Courser of Crufix or anybody else who's trying to actually hold you off by blocking.
Now, if you're Joe in this situation, and you mentioned this, that waiting seems like it favors Joe as opposed to Donald, do you keep attacking with the Archangel, or maybe time to put the brakes on and just let my more powerful cards take over, assuming I'll draw them?
Well, it really depends on how he sees the rest of his game plan going, you know, because he can't rely on Elspeth to block because of that Cavalry Pegasus.
Okay.
So he needs to have something else going for him. The thing the first thing, you know, my first thought is just Elspeth, make tokens and have Archangel on defense so that if Donald goes after the Elspeth or tries to keep attacking, the Archangel can brick wall in.
It looks like Joe may not be attacking this turn. You see Elspeth come down, make some soldier tokens.
I mean, it'd be nice to be able to attack and turn all those soldiers into 2/2s, but I think you got to keep the Archangel on defense because Donald has just too much of an aerial assault. And Joe doesn't care.
Yeah.
Reckless abandon.
It's time for the red zone yet again. Joe wants to close this game out.
Joe
Make
is
those
a
soldiers
closer.
bigger. So in comes Archangel for 4. That's going to go up to 15. Triggers, of course, will make the Archangel and the soldiers a little bit bigger. Walden will take that 4 points of damage to go down to 13. I agree with you. It does feel a touch aggressive, but I mean, this also probably forces Walden's turn to be attacking Elspeth in some fashion.
Yeah, I mean, so the tough thing here is that Lossett is threatening to counter swing with his Elspeth tokens, and even if he doesn't get in, I mean, even if the tokens can't attack this turn, there'll be 3/3s next turn, in which case they'll be presenting a, you know, lethal by a lot the turn after.
Well, everybody is attacking now. There's no messing around here.
See, I kind of like not attacking Elspeth and just racing.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I don't think you have time to attack Elspeth at this point. I think you have to just put so much pressure on Joe's life total because he can't block your guys anyway. Force him to come up with an answer.
Well, that's exactly what happened. You see Lossett went down to 4. So we're basically ignoring Elspeth right now. Now, do we have a lethal attack on the other side of the table? I think that's the question. You've got Archangel, which is a 5-power creature, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. But Walden has a blocker back in Boros Elite.
Yeah, I mean, if Joe could just remove the one blocker, he could, you know, potentially do lethal, but it'd have to be an answer that is not gold because of the Soldier of the Pantheon.
So long as you remember.
Yeah, the one extra life point that Donald sacrificed, looking like it might actually be important here.
It may matter. And Joe looks like he drew a copy of Sphinx's Revelation. This may be a Rev for 1 here, which would buffer the entire team.
Rev for 1 is pretty intense.
Looks like Rev for 1 is what it's going to be. So everybody's going to get a little bit bigger here. Judge is familiar. Do you want to be sacrificed? Looks like the answer is no. Thought about it for a second. Yeah? Well, Lossett will draw a single card. There's your trigger. Mutavault's going to get a little bit bigger, and I think, yeah, that's going to do it. So it looks like maybe Walden missed that one. But Joe Lossett is
Well, he didn't know that he was up against a Revelation.
Yeah,
you know?
Well, no, it's a Rev, but it's a Rev pre-combat.
Yep.
You know, so he revs pre-combat. I think if he Judges familiars it, then Joe actually, you don't know if Joe has a land or not, 'cause you don't know the other card, but Joe actually has to draw a land. Or he needs to have a land, I think, to not die
there. If the Boros Elite chumps, then you're only taking 12. You're right. I think he actually, Donald ends up at 1 if Joe doesn't have a land, an untapped land.
Yep. But either way, Joe Lossett able to tie things up here. Blue-white control and mono-white aggro will be going to a third game here. But for Walden, he's got to be thrilled that game 3, he's on the play in this matchup.
Yeah. I mean, you really do want to be the aggressor in this matchup if you're Walden, and coming out early, just curving out is like the best thing you could possibly do. I think the thing that really cost him that game was the detention sphere early on, hitting 2 creatures at the same time, kind of just was the tempo boost that Lossett needed. And Archangel of Thune is just an absolutely dominating board presence. So I think that Walden is going to want to make sure that he's got enough answers, a sufficient number of answers. I think if you're Walden, do you consider boarding in maybe 1 extra Glare of Heresy? I mean, after seeing 2 Archangels that game, or is it just he already knew what the plan is? He knew this is what Lossett was going to be bringing to the table. That's just part of the range of experiences.
I would want 1 more Glare. We saw Archangel, we saw Banishing, or excuse me, we saw Detentions here. We haven't seen Banishing like yet.
We saw Elspeth too.
Yeah, we saw Elspeth. I mean, given the power level of all of those cards, and I think at any point, if Walden was able to get 1 of those off the board, if a Glare had shown up off the top of his deck, he wins that game. Now, there is, of course, the risk that you mentioned right at the top of drawing too many reactive cards, not being able to put enough pressure on. So you have to find that balance.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, what do you think about Brave the Elements in this matchup?
I would want less of them.
Oh, yeah. He's also got his Johnny's Presence, too.
Yeah.
It's tough to have all of it, right?
Yeah. So I feel like Brave is okay in certain spots. It's okay against Sphere. It's okay at pushing damage through Elspeth. But how many of those do you really need after sideboard? This feels like a 1, maybe 2 of those after sideboard at best. Maybe you can push through the final blow when an Archangel comes down, when Joe taps out.
It is nice that Brave can sneak past an Archangel, like you're saying. The Ajani's Presence, I guess the Ajani's Presence, the nice thing about the Ajani's Presence is the Supreme Verdict counterplay. If you've got that kind of mana, it's just hard to have that much just laying around. But on the other side, I don't think that Joe's going to do anything different. You know, he knew that Archangel was going to be an important part of his plan. Does he have the Night Veil Specters or not? It looked like he sideboarded different, but he might have also just been, running the sick bluffs or whatever. But he did shuffle cards in from his sideboard into his main deck and take out some cards as though he was sideboarding different for Game 3, a game where he is on the draw instead of being on the play.
So I guess it depends on what you're trying to get out of Spectre, right, in this matchup. Like against Red, a 2-3 is just like impossible for them to attack through.
Yep.
But in this matchup, I mean, you take a look at things. Soldier of the Pantheon works through it. Borosleet with the Battalion works through it. Daring Skyjack works through it. Cavalry Pegasus, of course, has no effect. Banisher Priest, we saw left in.
So I actually think it might be Joe was not expecting Cavalry Pegasus, and because the Cavalry Pegasus had such an impact on that game, he may want to board in the Night Veil Spectre just to block flyers. Night Veil Spectre's ability to block a Cavalry Pegasus means that it's harder for Cavalry Pegasus to sneak by all the Elspeth tokens.
Sure.
So I think it's possible that we'll see some amount of Night Veil Spectre as a reaction to the modest Pegasus.
Also, I mean, that thing can get the beatdowns going. You're playing against a white deck, you have white mana.
Yeah.
The things you're going to find most times I don't think are all that impressive, but
yeah,
you
there's
can
a lot
cast
of
those
medium.
spells.
Most of the cards that you would draw for your opponent's deck are very medium in this matchup, but sometimes you just need some 1/1s for 1 and some 1/1s for 2.
Let's see how reactive Donald Walden got here. You see him taking a look at his opening hand right now. He wants to get off to a fast start with a 1-drop. He's got some of those here in Soldier of the Pantheon and Borosleet, a couple copies of Judge's Familiar as well. That doesn't look like a face of a man who wants to keep his hand. Oh, okay. I take it back.
No, Joe Lossett has a poker face.
Walden with no 1-drop. How big of a deal is that?
Depends on the rest of his hand. I mean, maybe he goes turn 2 Daring Skyjack, turn 3 Bramaz. You don't know, but certainly a 1-drop is what he was looking for.
Walden draws a card for the turn. You see the Mutavault over there. He had better have a 2. And he does in Keening Apparition. So that's a start. Can take care of Detention Spheres and Banishing Lights, of course. You saw the set. Pick up a copy of Elspeth for the turn. Looks like he's got some lands that come into play tapped.
Story of his life.
Yeah. He started off with Temple of Enlightenment. I think he's got a couple more copies of that in his hand right now.
What are the early game plays that Lossett really is looking for to get that tempo advantage he needs to catch up?
I mean, Joe's best plays, hardcasting Azorius Charm, putting that on top, Celestial Flare as well. His list does not have a card like Last Breath in it. So you're not going to find any of those here. If there's an Ajani, it's going to pump up the Keening Apparition here. So those are the cards that I think Joe is looking for. We saw him use Azorius Charm to great effect. Just time walking in the first game. Wasn't able to win that one, but that's what I think its use is going to be a lot in this matchup. Lossett does take 3, goes on to 17. Johnny takes up to 5.
Something really important, a Mutavault on Walden's side of the table.
That might be the biggest card that's been played the entire game.
Yeah. Mutavault is the most important card in the matchup, in my opinion. Donald Walden needing protection against Detention Sphere, protection against Supreme Verdict, having enough mana to make sure that he can play out his threats early, but then instead of flooding out, having more threats to send in Lossett's direction.
So it's got a 3rd land. It's a Mutavault of his own, and this, I imagine, is a Sphere. So that's going to take care of that. Now, of course, Walden can take this back whenever he'd like to because of Keening Apparition. So we'll see when he opts to do that. And Donald says, I'm going to serve in here for 3 first. So that's going to go down to 14. Let's see what the follow-up play is going to be. It's going to be a Glare of Heresy.
There is that Glare that you mentioned.
Not sure I'm in love with the sequencing there. And now it looks like no activation potentially of a Johnny as well. So not a great turn there for Walden.
Yeah, I mean, he could have activated Mutavault, put a counter on there. If he had tapped different, he could have played a Soldier of the Pantheon, but I think it just got a little hasty, you know, just moving a little too quick, and it's tough. The time is ticking down in the round, but Walden still has a lot going for him. Lossett is just a very strong player, not anyone to be trifled with.
Joe's got a Temple of Enlightenment as his 4th land, I believe. And he's going to play that, so take a look at the top card, a D-Sphere. I imagine that's going to stay on top, and it does. And he'll just pass the turn back over to Walden, who will draw a card. Let's see if there's any better Johnny management on this turn, because that card is crucial to him winning the game. Instead, trying to work his way towards the Archangel of Thune that he does have in his hand. Looks like we're going to fire up Mutavault. Going to put a counter over here on the Keening Apparition. And now it's time to get into the red zone here with a 4-4 and a 2-2. You see Lossett pull that Azorius Charm forward.
He's trying to make the Keening Apparition a more tempting Azorius Charm target, specifically because of Brave the Elements, but Lossett reads him and correctly hits the Mutavault instead of the Keening Apparition. Excellent play by Joe Lossett.
Now there's a Soldier of the Pantheon before passing the turn back, so Lossett's going to go down to 10. The big question is, does he have that 5th land for the Archangel? That's a copy of Detention Sphere. I guess the 5th land right now is in hand, but it looks to be another copy of Temple of Enlightenment. As good as those temples are, and they're great, of course, the fact that they do come into play tap, there's a real cost to playing a bunch of those in your deck.
Yeah, absolutely. So it looks like Lossett has Supreme Verdict. The nice thing about Supreme Verdict here is its ability to dodge Brave the Elements.
So there goes the Apparition and the Soldier. Mutavault's the card on top of Walden's deck. Can still be a headache in the game, but it's a little slow to the party right now. There's a Pegasus, and now that's going to tick up into a 2-2. And the last card there in Walden's hand is a Brave the Elements, so it looks like Lossett may have survived this onslaught.
Lossett still rife with options. Half his life total left to work with. The big thing Lossett wants to do is just try to quiet this game down, you know, stabilize.
Well, Archangel does a pretty good job of that. The 3-4 has shown up yet again, and now Walden needs an answer right away. Brave Elements isn't going to be able to push through enough damage. However, a Glare of Heresy off the top is a great way to do that.
Best possible draw here.
Yep, and there is a Glare. That's going to take care of the Archangel. Gotta imagine there's some interest in firing Mutavault here. I mean, leaving up Brave is pretty good, but Brave just protecting Cavalry Pegasus isn't great.
I'd love to see a counter on the Mutavault here, you know?
Yeah, I'm with you. Because you have to imagine that Pegasus is going to leave at some point.
And just diversifying your threats. But either way, this way we see Lossett lose half of his remaining life total again, putting him at 5.
Presenting lethal next turn. Sphinx's Revelation with the draw here for Joe. He does have an Azorius Charm at the ready as well, so we'll see exactly how he wants to move forward. Also with an Elspeth, but now's probably not the best time to tap out for that, as the Pegasus can actually give Mutavault flying to it being everything. So here's 3 mana. Are we going to see a Detention Sphere maybe on a Cavalry Pegasus?
Whatever it takes.
It's going to be a Johnny. So the Planeswalker's going to go away. And Lossett's going to pass the turn back.
Now, Lossett, continuing to play around Brave the Elements, he plays it this way so that he can Brave the Elements the Mutavault. I mean, he can Azorius Charm the Mutavault. And survive yet again another turn. Donald Walden definitely has Lossett's back against the wall, but Lossett is rich with options if he can just survive.
And here comes Mutavault. We're attacking for lethal. Azorius Charm. It's
Oh.
going to target the Pegasus. That's a Brave the Elements, and that is going to do it?
Yeah, it went so far playing around Brave the Elements and then slipping for a turn. Perhaps it was just a calculated risk.
And that's going to do it.
Joe has to extend the hand.
Donald Walden's going to defeat Joe Lossett 2-1. Mono White Aggro taking down number 2 on our Season 3 leaderboard. Congratulations, Donald Walden, getting the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. Calvary Pegasus. Just, I mean, he puts in work.
It's just too much to overcome.
Yeah, it's tough. But I think that Mono White is going to be a particularly interesting one to watch in the weeks to come, given the new additions of toys like Spirit Bond, most notably, but to some degree also Obelisk of Erd and even the Painlands, you know?
The Painlands are, you know, I'm excited by them, but they're not the kind of card that generates a lot of excitement. But, you know, again, we can't underestimate how important those cards are going to be.
Yeah, I mean, they're role players. The key is that they give more untapped dual lands to aggro decks, which I like, you know, getting a chance for people to not be stuck in the paradigm of just playing with temples and tap lands. And... All right, well, we're back. I'm Patrick Chapin with Cedric Phillips.
That's me.
We're here at SCG Portland. I don't think we have another match to go to.
Unfortunately, we do not. That's pretty much going to do it for this particular round. Of course, Joe playing blue-white. Going to take a little while, even though he's playing against an aggressive deck. So it looks like round number 3 is just about done. When we do come back, we will talk about more awesome announcements that we do have. Of course, there are plenty more M15 cards. We haven't talked about the Soul Cycle a lot, even though the Soul Cycle is old in theory, because those are one of the first ones to come out. They are important. They may be the new titans of the format, so we'll talk about those when we come back as well. But for right now, Patrick and I will take a short little break, and then we'll be back here for round number 4 from Portland. Thanks for watching, guys.
The world's most advanced Magic the Gathering app, SCG Mobile, has an updated Android interface that's easier to use than ever before. The app is free, and you can start accessing StarCityGames.com content from your Android or iPhone instantly.